I'm going to read to you one of the stories that really tore me up in high school, and you have probably heard it yourself, The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. You know the story? Some of you, yes. $1.87. That was all. She had put it aside, 1 cent and then another in her careful buying of meat and other food. Della counted the money 3 times, $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was nothing to do but fall on the bed and cry, and Della did it. While the lady of the home is slowly growing quieter, we can look at the home. Furnished rooms at a cost of $8 a week. There is little more to say about it. In the hall below was a letterbox, too small to hold a letter. There was an electric bell, but it could not make a sound. Also, there was a name beside the door, Mr. James Dillingham Young. When the name was placed there, Mr. James Dillingham Young was being paid $30 a week. Now he was being paid only $20. The name seemed too long now and too important. It should have been Mr. James D. Young. But when James Dillingham Young entered the furnished rooms, his name became very short indeed. Mrs. James Dillingham Young put her arms warmly around him and called him Jim. You've already met her. Her name is Della. Della finished her crying and cleaned the marks of it from her face. She stood by the window and looked out with no interest. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 with which to buy Jim a gift. She had put aside as much as she could for months with this result. $20 a week is not much. Everything had cost more than she had expected. It always happened like that. Only $1.87 to buy a gift for Jim, her Jim. She had had many happy hours planning something nice for him, something nearly good enough, something almost worth the honor of belonging to Jim. There was a looking glass beneath the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen the kind of looking glass that is placed in $8 furnished rooms. It was very narrow. A person could see only a little of himself at a time. However, if he was very thin and moved very quickly, he might be able to get a good view of himself. Della, being quite thin, had mastered this art. Suddenly she turned from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brightly, but her face had lost its color. Quickly she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its complete length. The James Dillingham Youngs were very proud of 2 things which they owned. One thing was Jim's gold watch. It had once belonged to his father, and long ago it had belonged to his father's father. And the other thing was Della's hair. If a queen had lived in the rooms near theirs, Della would have washed and dried her hair where the queen could see it. Della knew her hair was more beautiful than any queen's jewels and gifts. If a king had lived in the same house with all his riches, Jim would have looked at his watch every time they met. Jim knew that no king had anything so valuable. So now Della's beautiful hair fell about her, shining like a falling stream of brown water. It reached below her knee. It almost made itself into a dress for her. And then she put it up on her head again, nervously and quickly. Once she stopped for a moment and stood still while a tear or 2 ran down her face. She put on her old brown coat. She put on her old brown hat. With the bright light still in her eyes, she moved quickly out the door and down to the street. Where she stopped, the sign said, Mrs. Sofroni, hair articles of all kinds. Up to the 2nd floor, Della ran and stopped to get her breath. Mrs. Sofroni, large, too white, cold-eyed, looked at her. Will you buy my hair? I buy hair, said Mrs. Sofroni. Take off your hat and let me look at you. Down fell the brown waterfall. $20, said Mrs. Sofroni, lifting the hair to feel its weight. Give it to me quick, said Della. Oh, and the next 2 hours seemed to fly. She was going from one shop to another to find a gift for Jim. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the shops, and she had looked in every shop in the city. It was a gold watch chain, very simply made. Its value was in its rich and pure material. Because it was so plain and simple, you never knew that it was very valuable. All good things are like this. It was good enough for the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that Jim must have it. It was like him, quietness and value. Jim and the chain both had quietness and value. She paid $21 for it, and she hurried home with the chain and 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim could look at his watch and learn the time anywhere he might be. Though the watch was so fine it had never had a fine chain. He sometimes took it out and looked at it only when no one could see him do it. When Della arrived home, her mind quieted a little. She began to think more reasonably. She tried to cover the sad marks of what she had done. Love and large-hearted giving, when added together, can leave deep marks. It is never easy to cover these marks, dear friends. Never easy. Within 40 minutes, her head looked a little better. With her short hair, she looked wonderfully like a schoolboy. She stood at the looking glass for a long time. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he looks at me a second time, he'll say I look like a girl who sings and dances for money. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.87? At 7, Jim's dinner was ready for him. Jim was never late. Della held the watch chain in her hand and sat near the door where he always entered. Then she heard his step in the hall and her face lost color for a moment. She often said little prayers quietly about simple, everyday things. And now she said, please, God, make him think I'm still pretty. The door opened and Jim stepped in. He looked very thin, and he was not smiling. Poor fellow, he was only 22 years old, with a family to take care of. He needed a new coat, and he had nothing to cover his cold hands. Jim stopped inside the door. He was as quiet as a hunting dog when it is near a bird. His eyes looked strangely at Della, and there was an expression in them that she could not understand. It filled her with fear. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor anything she had been expecting. He simply looked at her with that strange expression on his face. Della went to him. Jim, dear, don't look at me like that. I had my hair cut off and sold it. I couldn't live through Christmas without giving you a gift. My hair will grow out. You won't care, will you? My hair grows really fast. It's Christmas, Jim. Let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I have for you. You've cut off your hair? Jim asked slowly. He seemed to labor to understand what had happened. He seemed not to feel sure he knew. Cut it off and sold it, said Della. Don't you like me now? I'm me, Jim. I'm the same without my hair. Jim looked around the room. You say your hair is gone? You don't have to look for it, Della said. It's sold, I tell you. Sold and gone. It's the night before Christmas, boy. Now be good to me because I sold it for you. Maybe the hairs in my head could be counted, but no one could ever count my love for you. Shall we eat dinner, Jim? Jim put his arms around Della. For 10 seconds, let us look in another direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. How different are they? Someone may give you an answer, but it will be wrong. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. My meaning will be explained soon. From inside the code, Jim took something tied in paper. He threw it on the table. I want you to understand me, Dell, he said. Nothing like a haircut could make me love you less. But if you'll open that, you may know what I felt when I came in. White fingers pulled off the paper. and then a cry of joy, and then a change to tears. For there lay the combs that Della had seen in a shop window and loved for a long time. Beautiful combs with jewels, perfect for her beautiful hair. She had known they cost too much for her to buy them. She had looked at them without the least hope of owning them. And now they were hers, but her hair was gone. She held them to her heart, and at last was able to look up and say, "Jim, my hair grows so fast." And then she jumped up and said, "Oh." Jim had not yet seen his beautiful gift. She held it out to him in her open hand. The gold seemed to shine softly as if with her own warm and loving spirit. "Isn't it perfect, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at your watch 100 times a day now, so give me your watch. I want to see how they look together." Jim sat down and smiled. "Della, let's put our Christmas gifts away and keep them a watch. They're too nice to use right now. I sold the watch to get the money to buy the combs. And now I think we should have our dinner." Now the Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the newborn Christ child. They were the first to give Christmas gifts. Being wise, their gifts were doubtless wise ones. And here I have told you the story of two children who were not wise. Each sold the most valuable thing he owned in order to buy a gift for the other. But let me speak a last word to the wise of these days. Of all who give gifts, these two were the most wise. Everywhere they are the most wise. Of all who give and receive gifts such as they are the most. They are the Magi. These words are from Sophia Thas, religious educator in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And this is what she said. "For so the children come as they have been coming. Always in the same way they come, born of the seed of man and woman. No angels herald their beginnings. No prophets predict their future courses. No wise men see a star to show where to find the babe that will save humankind. Yet each night a child is born is a holy night. Fathers and mothers sitting beside their children's cribs feel glory in the sight of a new life beginning. They ask, where and how will this new life end? Or will it ever end? Each night a child is born is a holy night, a night for singing, a night for wondering, a time for worshiping." I invite you now to rise and bow your. The best story I ever heard about gift giving has nothing to do with Christmas and everything to do with Christmas. It's about an African boy who wanted to give a gift to his teacher who was going home to England. The child had no money and his options were few. The day before the teacher was to leave, the child brought her a huge seashell. The teacher asked the boy where he could have found such a shell. He told her there was only one spot where there were such extraordinary shells could be found. And when he named the place, a certain way, many miles away, the teacher was speechless. Why, it's gorgeous. It's wonderful. But you shouldn't have gone all the way to get a gift for me. His eyes brightening, the boy said, "Long walk, part of gift." Long walk, part of gift. Most of the meaningful gifts we give to each other require some version of the long walk. The long walk we sign on for with children who need our patience, our wisdom, our honesty, and our trust more than we might first have imagined when their lives began. The long walk we share with our spouses, which which takes us through uncharted, unexpected territories of sickness and health, richer and poorer, better or worse. The long walk we take with friends when they are grieving the loss of someone they love, when they are ill, when they are discouraged. The long walk of feeling a sense of unity with those whom prosperity has left behind. The long walk of reconciliation with all that separates us from a deep sense of life's great purpose and meaning. Long walk, part of gift. When Christmas has been tidied up and packed away for another year, the gifts acknowledged, many already forgotten, the new year stretches out in front of us. What will get us through those months with all that they may hold that we cannot foretell? All that will get us through will not be the things in the boxes. We must look to the hands of those who bought and wrapped and carried those gifts. Whether with their gifts they are telling us something too wonderful, perhaps too embarrassing for words. They are telling us that for us, they will take the long walk. So when you open the box and find the chainsaw, the long underwear, the fruit cake, the terribly ugly Christmas sweater, the pot holder, or the seashell from a distant ocean, remember that it's not just the thought that counts. Remember, too, that the long walk was part of gift. We're going to take the morning offering now. Jim, would you?